So we are in Berlin, and you do the Xerox Salon, which is quite interesting for me, because I think it both feeds the needs for an art lover and also the technical part a little bit. It's also around creative process sharing platform, but you recently started a residency, which is very interesting. So how these things came up to you?
Yes, okay. So there's like the history of the organization of the Xerox Salon, which started in early 2020, but there's also like some prior chapters in the story. So we'll start with the salon, and then if we want to, we can go further back. The early days of the pandemic, early 2020, I'd come back to live in Berlin a few months previously, and I was really inspired by some reading groups and conversations that were happening in the workspace that I'm based at in Schöneberg called Trust. And so I really enjoyed these conversations. They were moving between disciplines, mixing art, philosophy and technology in really interesting ways. And that time I was working remotely for an American university, starting a journal, like an academic journal. And I was really excited by this para-institutional way of doing research, sharing knowledge and building communities. And so it was from that we started having these salons, like, inspired by the French tradition of salons, which you could think of as post-disciplinary discussions. So it's an event series discussing kind of esoteric topics around digital culture, and then from there we were meeting regularly from the start of the pandemic, offline at the workspace. We moved online because of the pandemic, and we just caught, I think, a little bit of a zeitgeist moment for the topics we were interested in, and critique or taking critical perspectives on. And also the pandemic arrived, catching everyone by surprise. So all of a sudden everything moves online, everyone's calendars are empty. So our community actually formed pretty quickly. 2020, 2021, we built this really amazing community, not just in Berlin, but worldwide, of let's say like philosophers, artists, designers, technologists, and everything in between that. And we had these small, intimate conversations where people from different backgrounds come together and talk about these things. So it's a really mixed up community, a heterogeneous community. And so from there we started writing together, we started making creative stuff together, we started a residency program to kind of, because we have this kind of interesting intergenerational thing going on at Trust and at the Salon. We've got people like me in our 40s, and we've got people that are in their 30s and their 20s as well. So it's actually, it's really nice. It feels like a new twist on the collegiate environment. There's no professors, there's no students, we're all actually peers, we're all together. But we have this kind of this intergenerational passing of knowledge. So it's a very unique kind of organization, unique kind of community. It's still, I would say, para-institutional and underdefined. So we've gone to great lengths not to define it too much. We could say, oh, it's a think tank, it's a creative studio, it's a project space, it's a this. If you take some of these definitions, it makes the organization easier to understand from the outside, but at the expense of possibly limiting you in terms of the more interesting things you can do. So basically it started as a thing, extend the intellectual adventures I couldn't have in the university. Yeah, so that's, and now it's taken a life of its own. We have a community, we get, we did the European Commission funded projects, we develop, art, philosophy, technology, collaborations and projects. And so it really just all spiraled from this event series, from the wish to get together and talk.
Yesterday I met a friend in Berlin, and he mentioned to me that art is not anymore the inspiration factor for many people, because it basically just duplicates trends what they already had and something like that. And that maybe that moment comes into technology, because technology is fresher and
I think technology is now a little bit somewhat driving art as well. So a lot of the new trends we see in art, for example, now we can talk about generative art or something like this, AI related art. It's being driven by technological development. So it seems now that, we used to say that, politics is downstream from culture or something like this. Maybe now we can say that it seems like at least some aspects of creativity are downstream from technology now. At least in like the popular discourse. I guess you always have this question of like, I don't even want to say the what is art thing, but like what's the mission of art, what's the goal of art? Is it to change things, do like praxis and activism in the world, or is it to introduce ideas to different kinds of audiences? And so the way we use art, the Xerox Salon uses art, is we very often have a theoretical basis of a particular topic, technology, question, and we might develop that with writings in the conventional pedagogical way, philosophy, critical theory, and so on. And then the art might come as a way for us to exemplify or to reiterate, explore those concepts, those notions, those theories in different ways. So that's how, like, my unfinished philosophy book about Bitcoin became a theatre production or a card game or a computer game. So we're often like mixing the two, but art is a nice way to exemplify, to bring theories out into the open.
Well, actually, when I first looked at your webpage, I was amazed by, okay, you have talk about AI, crypto money, and many other things, Web3, for example. Well, actually, about Web3, it's one of my favorite topics because I think the technology in general is dominated by the big companies. So actually, Microsoft can decide what to see or how can you see your computers, because I think like 90% of the people uses
Windows.
Windows. Even if we have the alternatives, Linux is for free actually, but it seems that the popular
Linux is hard. Like I use Linux. It's hard, and I'm not a great programmer, so for me sometimes it's difficult, and not everything runs in Linux. So I also have a computer that runs Windows, and so even like to really step away from these platforms is difficult. But the thing you're getting at here, Balazs, is the promise of Web3 with respect to the failed potential of Web2 and the internet dream. That we dreamed of this kind of like very free and fair cyberspace world, universe, and what we got instead was we live inside a tower block created by a mega corporation, and you can live in one of 5 tower blocks. That's your internet, whether you go to Google or Netflix or Amazon or whoever. And so this promise of returning agency through ownership to the stakeholders of these networks is what the Web3 dream is all about. Web3 also is associated with tokens, cryptographic tokens. And when there's a token for a project, it's usually everything becomes about the token. These tokens are in markets. The markets go in cycles of up and down. And right now we're in this very down phase of it. So a lot of these projects are having a bad time. People think that Web3 is dead and it's not coming back. So like the technology will exist, but whether this imaginary, this notion of Web3 stays around or it gets changed into something else is an interesting thing for us to speculate on.
I was always wondered when people think that crypto is just about money, and when the Bitcoin is flying, that okay, I make money out of it. That's not the goal of the usage of the crypto money, because crypto money is actually provides you an anonymity. So actually you can use it in Panama, and you can use it in Berlin, and you can use it in London or Brussels or in anywhere in the world, but you cannot do with your banknotes, because the banknotes is even US dollar or euro or Corona in Czech Republic. So there are many things.
Yeah, these things work best. These alternative value systems work best in a place where things aren't going great. That's because they're really like an alternative, and they're kind of, the technology is not perfect, they're hard to use, it's expensive to transact, you can mess it up. So there are all of these kind of downsides to it. But in a situation where you're in a place and the economy is not working for the regular person, or the currency is collapsing, you mentioned Panama, I think, and El Salvador, they both dollarized. Their internal currencies collapsed, were replaced by the US dollar in a de facto way, not in an official way. It just became the new thing. And then they're not in control of their economies because the dollar is not printed there. And so to a country like that, or to let's say Argentina, where the inflation is like 30%, or somewhere like that, or even a country which has like embargoes, sanctions against it. Say you're a normal person in Belarus or Iran, Venezuela, and you can't use the banking system because some government that used to rule over you did something that an important country didn't like. And so having these alternatives that was the thing that spoke to me about these technologies first, when I found them 10 years ago. So I used to be a musician. I was touring the west coast of the US, and a friend said, let's go visit my buddy. He's doing an internship at Intel. So we went to Silicon Valley from San Francisco. He opened his closet door and showed us a Bitcoin mining machine. This is 2013. And when he explained the thing, how it works, he didn't like it because it was using a lot of energy. It was very expensive for him to run this thing. But having a refugee background, so my family's from Iraq, I immediately realized that this is the value that the bad people can't take away from you. And so even if it's not perfect, it still fulfills an important purpose. Yeah, and I think that for me, the freedom aspect of it, or the, let's say, alternatives to state mediated systems, that is the core value of these things.
And if you go back in the salon thing, have now a community, which is sometimes even better than sell for a high price, whatever, because then the community can decide on what direction is interesting. I mean, that is still, we haven't mentioned, for example, the glasses, the virtual reality glasses.
Yeah, but I don't know about this. Like, I don't know if we'll all be wearing VR headsets next year or something like this. I feel like there was a trend that started in the pandemic of us moving more towards technology, as we couldn't, the outside world was closed from us, so everyone moved into technology. So then Oculus headsets took off. I bought one 3 years ago. People started buying these Peloton bikes with computers on the bicycle, and now everyone has kind of come out of that, and I think there's now hopefully a move back to, like, I don't want to do my spreadsheets in the metaverse. I don't need more spreadsheets. So there's I hope that we continue to humanize as the technology develops, as a response to that. And that's kind of one of the things that drives my interest in technology, is to look at the human perspectives around them. So we can understand the technical aspects of the technology, but they don't exist in a vacuum. Once they come out of the developer's mind or computer or the machine learning model, they go out into the world and they touch humans and societies which we live in. And that's, I think, for me, the most important part. We have to remember that every technical system is really a socio-technical system, that there's a human part to this system. Even if it's abstracted away with machine logic, we can't forget that. And so one of the most important lessons I've learned from working with technology, researching it, developing it and so on, is to bring the users into the conversation as much and as early as possible. Otherwise it's the designers, the technologists, making these things that they want instead of what people want and what people need. So yeah, user-focused ideas. And I don't know if the users want 10 hours a day in their metaverse goggles. I'm not sure.
Definitely not, of course. Yes. Actually, I can imagine that you've been asking every time about the future, what the future looks like. But actually, I want to ask something about the past, because the social media was a real hit for me. That when in yesterday, I mean, it was a long time ago, but at a certain moment, nobody was there, and the next day, it feels like that. Everyone was there and asked that, hey, are you there? I just communicate over these things. So did you see that this is coming?
I didn't understand the scale of it at first. So I joined Facebook in, I think, 2006-07 when it opened to university students in the UK. I was making a PhD at the time. And so I joined it then, but it just felt like a very small message board, like a forum. We had PHP forums before this. It felt really just like a not such big shift from that. But then the scale of it really took me by surprise until I saw how my family in other parts of the world outside the West were using it. So these are people that they come from a war-torn place, Iraq, and they had a lot of problems communicating with each other for many years. The phones would get cut. They'd be listened to, the conversations would be listened to, they would get cut. Letters would be opened and contents of the letters read, money taken or whatever. So they lived in an era where communication was difficult. They put a lot of importance on being able to communicate. So when social media came around, and I'm not just thinking about the Facebooks and Twitters of the world, but even things like messaging apps, which I also consider like it's the communication side, I guess, where Facebook DMs bleed into WhatsApp conversations. Things like Viber and WhatsApp, Telegram became incredibly useful for these people, for my family and other people like them, diaspora people, to keep in touch between countries, between divides, about their realities. And so that, when I saw that happening, that it really made this kind of formerly unbridgeable gap of communication, of culture, small. Like all of a sudden my mother's on the phone to her sisters every day while they make, they cook their meals together. Or they, what are you doing today? I do this, I go here, I do that, as if they're next door.
Yeah, well, actually it's quite interesting when sudden generations are popping out from technology because they are not signed up for the newest things. For example, now TikTok is for the 20s. I don't think that any 40, 50 or 60 people are there.
I feel too old for a TikTok. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. We are.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm too. I'm out from these things because I don't want to see just people dancing. But in this way, I think maybe the generation will be more and more fragmented because of these new things.
Yeah, I mean, I already hear stories of younger people. I hang out with younger people quite a lot, and they're using different services to the ones that I use now. Like, so, you know, we talk about the previous generation being too old for Instagram. The next generation seems like maybe they're too young for it. Like, a lot of people these days don't want those kinds of platforms, those kinds of experiences, that kind of data harvesting, that kind of lack of privacy. So it all depends on what you prioritize. I heard a lot of younger people now, they don't really want to use social media because social media is like where their parents hang out. So then it's not cool. Like, if your parents hang out there, it's probably not cool. If your grandparents are there, it's definitely not cool. So they go you could say, like, towards the dark forest or towards the cozy web, away from the public internet, the town square of, say, for example, Twitter, where you write a tweet that anyone in the world could read it. You could be talking to the President of the United States if it works out. To like smaller communities, things like Discord servers, things like Telegram chats, WhatsApp group messages, to retain a sense of, I guess, community and familiarity, as the technology mediated world seems to make us more alienated from our.
Okay, let's talk about your latest essay. I have to read the title: Profit Motives and Nightmare Stage. It's actually saying that technology becoming a religion. Oh, well, you talk about many other things as well. And my favorite quote is code as law.
This essay that just came out, it's called Profit Motives and Network States on Xerox Folklore. It's exploring the entanglements between technology, capital and spirituality. And, you know, we see some really interesting new examples of, let's say, technology colonialism being made possible by the technology and the capital of Web3. That's happening right now. That was the reason I wrote the piece. And there's a concept called the network state, which is something that I'm talking about in the essay. And this is to do with a group of highly aligned people online, making a community that is not geographic, they're across the world. And they basically get together to decide on their values, raise capital, and then start to acquire territory. And so they want to kind of make their own countries in a kind of, in a new way with digital technology. That's all fine as a concept, but there are people that are trying to do this now already. The book came out last year, they're trying to do it now. So one of the things about Web3 and the crypto blockchain space is there's not a lot of historians in the space. There's people that are doing the history of the space and the anthropology of the space, like myself, but there's not many trained historians that know about history. And there's a great quote from George Santayana, which is, those who do not remember history are condemned to repeat it. So for a lot of people in the blockchain space, history began in 2008 when Satoshi Nakamoto's paper was issued, was made public. And so the goal that I've got with this Profit Motives project, and specifically with this essay on network states, is to look for historical trends that kind of inform where we might be going. And looking for combinations between technology, religion and capital. And so the example that I picked out, it's not talked about until now, but it's very interesting, is the Crusades. So this is like the Christian holy wars to the Middle East that began at the end of the 11th century, captured a bunch of territory, including Jerusalem in the Middle East, and then kept it for about a century, then tried to win it back for about a century. So this is the High Middle Ages, 1100 until 1300 or so. And at one point, not long after the First Crusade, which was quite successful because it caught the defenders unaware of its size and its ambition, there were 4 countries, Crusader states, set up in the Middle East, in Antioch, Edessa, Jerusalem, and one more I can't remember right now. And these states weren't based on national crowns, on nations. These were international alliances by these monastic military orders like the Knights Templar, Knights Hospitaller, Teutonic Knights. And they were also mixing technology, spirituality and capital. They made some very early financial innovations around credit, banking and finance to help pilgrims stay safe as they travelled from their homes to the Holy Lands, when there's a risk of being robbed and things like that. So they set up a credit network for that. They financed kings. The Central Bank of France and England was at the temple in London and Paris for a while. So they managed the affairs of nations. And they provided this logistics network, security, and ultimately they had an army. And so I'm trying to make a comparison to those organizations from nearly 1,000 years ago to what these Web3 colonialists seem to be doing now. And you can also bring in examples like Wagner, this private army that's in Ukraine and Russia that did this mutiny recently. There's examples of things like seasteading. There's a Bitcoin city that they want to build in El Salvador. There's an Ethereum thing called Zazalu, another Web3 thing called Praxis. I see these very interesting examples of nation building using whatever interesting technologies are available at the time.